the Great Resignation.
Great Resignation.
The Great Resignation, that's what some experts are calling the growing trend of workers quitting or just changing careers.
In 2021, a record number of people decided to quit their jobs, and this was during a period called the Great Resignation.
I just quit my job. When you're young, you got to make rash decisions on your future. You always got to think about that all the time. If you go to a place, a dead-end job, and you get comfortable there, you may not never leave that place.
Journalists, economists, corporations, they were all really confused by this. And studies were showing that between the months of April and September alone, over 24 million Americans had decided to leave. However, over this period, people started to come up with stories of pain, stories of hardship, stories whereby they started to tell that they were wearing a numbing armor on themselves to be able to deal with the work days. They talked about burnout as though they were this car battery that had gone dead and was left on the side of the road.
I had so much amazing stuff happen, but every day when I logged in, I knew that I was betraying myself.
I was burnt out. I was doing too much.
Personally, I was dealing with the lowest energy that I have ever had in my entire life.
I was not happy. I'm still not happy about it, but also I'm happy that I'm not with that company anymore.
And what was emerging was that there was a hidden epidemic revealing itself in that moment, and that the collective psyche was coming to a realization that it was spiritually ill. In this video, I'm going to explain exactly what spiritual illness is, what spiritual health is, and 4 very common symptoms so that you can understand whether or not you are spiritually ill within the confines of the modern workplace. And finally, I'll explain how you yourself can move towards spiritual health and how society as a whole will be better if you do. The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. What is called resignation is confirmed desperation. Henry Thoreau, Walden. Now, my name is Joe Yulee, and I'm a philosopher. I'm absolutely obsessed with vocations and callings and helping people to choose their path, know their path, and then walk their path in the modern world. And one of the things that I'm constantly having to help and educate people on is that the modern work and the way that's set up is making us spiritually ill. And you yourself might have experienced these symptoms of spiritual illness yourself. You might have opened up a laptop one time before you were getting ready to go to work and just found yourself in tears. You might have found yourself just absolutely dreading going to work the next day on Sunday and then thinking, I don't know how I'm going to get through this week. You might have found yourself landing a job and being applauded by your parents and your peers for that particular job, only to find yourself rethinking it completely, scrolling on LinkedIn for another opportunity. You might have also found yourself just absolutely losing your mind, sending out monotonous emails and back and forths, having to attend just soul-sucking Zoom meetings, and the only real highlight of your day is looking forward to lunch or looking forward to your 4-week vacation where you're able to travel across the world to Paris or Barcelona or the Greek islands. And yet even that isn't enough. And these future moments of possible pleasure become the only things that you feel as though you can hold on to. And I even remember for myself, before I ended up leaving my insurance job over 5 years ago to pursue being a philosopher, when I was showing up and going to work, what people didn't know in the background was that I was really just suffering. And I even had these moments where I would just be breaking down and thinking, this can't be it. This can't be all that there is. And these are all symptoms of spiritual illness. And the way that modern jobs and modern careers are structured is that it's creating such an environment that makes us sick. And so if these are the symptoms, what is spiritual illness? And if you've ever seen Francis Bacon's Study for a Portrait, it was painted in 1952, and it shows this man who looks as though he's in a suit and a tie, a businessman, and he's got his mouth open, so it looks as though he's screaming, and there are these lines around him holding in what is being yelled out, and it's almost as though his screams are being muffled, his screams are silent, his screams can't come out. And when I'm talking about spiritual illness, this visual really speaks to what this is. It is screaming in a glass cage with no sound made. And this is the quiet desperation that Thoreau speaks about. Now, if we move from a visual definition to a worded definition, then spiritual illness can be defined as a condition that occurs when an individual is unable to access their own life force. They are disconnected from the spiritual plane of their own life. And by the spiritual plane of existence, I mean the non-material plane of existence. Think about your soul, your spirit, your inner life, right? Your personal feelings. There are all these different aspects of ourselves that don't show up in the material world. So to put it simply, there are parts of us that are unseen, and yet they need as much nurturing as our physical existence, as our physical body needs. Otherwise, we become spiritually ill. And in a world focused on consumerism and is dominated by these newfound values in neo-feudalism, techno-feudalism, our society has been completely disconnected from the spirit of its existence, its spiritual nurturance. I have frequently seen people become neurotic when they content themselves with inadequate or wrong answers to the questions of life. They seek position, marriage, reputation, outward success, or money, and remain unhappy even when they have attained what they were seeking. Such people are usually confined within too narrow a spiritual horizon. Their life has not sufficient content, sufficient meaning. If they are unable to develop into more spacious personalities, the neurosis generally disappears. Carl Jung. So what is spiritual health? Well, the first thing we've got to do is we have to extend health beyond biology. And this is one of the major insights that came forward with the development of psychology in the early 20th century, and this bringing forth that, hey, there are these deeper levels of health that reside within the psyche. But even with psychological health and biological health, there is something else that we need to look at, which is spiritual health. And spiritual health is when your own personal purpose aligns and connects with your divine purpose. And these two things are interwoven. They are in union with each other. And this is where someone can become spiritually healthy. And so we have our individual purpose, we have our divine purpose, and they come together, and they're the same thing. And this implies that our work needs to have our spirit in it, meaning that when we nurture our spirit, we're nurturing our spiritual health. We're taking care of the immaterial aspects of us, these unseen parts of us, and yet these unseen parts are incredibly important. And we're nurturing them and we're taking care of them in such a way that they are as important as our physical being, our body, for example. Taking care of your fitness and your health and your diet. It's the same level of importance. And I would actually argue that it's more important. Which leads us to the really big problem, which is that in modern work, the spirit is missing from the work. It's not there, right? It's exiled. It's exiled to weekends. It's exiled to, you can do your meditation or your mantras or your prayers before work and after work, but not in the workplace. It's pushed towards holidays, right? You can celebrate and do that stuff in the holidays, but not in the work. The spirit shouldn't be in the work based on the paradigm and views of our current social worldview of how work should be done. And this is fundamentally wrong, and it sort of speaks as if everything is not connected. I mean, you just need to look at someone that is held up as one of the pinnacle figures of modern humans, that being Leonardo da Vinci, who said that realize that everything is connected to everything else. And in this context, it means that When the spirit is missing from our work, right? When the thing that we're meant to be doing in this life is missing from what we're doing in this life, it leaves the work hollow. It has no oomph. The word spiritual originates from the Latin word spiritus, which means breath, spirit, or soul. So when I speak of spiritual fulfillment in our career paths, I mean that every step should breathe life into our own soul. Our work should enliven us, not decay us. Now, here are 4 really common symptoms that occur for anyone that is experiencing spiritual illness in the modern workplace. Symptom 1, poor mental health. Depression, heightened anxiety, irritability, muddy thinking. These are all symptoms of someone that is experiencing some form of spiritual illness within the workplace. And oftentimes people that experience this think that there's something wrong with them, that they've got to sort themselves out. And one of the issues with thinking of it like this is that it implies that we ourselves are lone islands, that we are isolated, and that the environment doesn't have an impact on us. However, if we look at something like general systems theory, we can see that we are not, as humans, these closed systems. We are open systems. We are in relationship with our environment, and it goes both ways, meaning that we are shaped by our own environment. We are shaped by the places that we work. So when we are suffering at work, it means that we've noticed something. It doesn't mean that we're broken because we are suffering. And to ever consider someone's mental health, there also has to be a close consideration of someone's environment. If you think about it like this, placing yourself in a sick environment and becoming unwell doesn't mean you are the cause of the illness. Now, to understand the effects of how the environment impacts your mental health, I want you to do a thought experiment for a moment. I want you to close your eyes and just imagine that you are in a really peaceful Japanese Zen garden. And there's nowhere to be, there's nowhere to go to, there's no to-do lists going on. You are at peace and you are at calm and you are intentionally raking lines and being in that space. And I want you to notice how you feel with the morning sunlight on your face, with having no agenda, no real aim, except for just being there. You'll notice that there's this real calming quality, the sense of Now, I want you to open your eyes now and answer this question, and answer it openly and just see what comes up. And this question is, why do I believe my work can't exist in an environment that makes me feel like this? Why do I believe my work can't exist in an environment that makes me feel like this? It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. Jiddu Krishnamurti. Symptom 2, needing the money. I have bills to pay. Now, this is one of the most common critiques that I hear when someone is really contemplating and thinking about potentially leaving an unfulfilling job, and it causes them oftentimes to not do it. But to start to think about this from the standpoint of expenses, we can't just think about this as a financial expense. We have to think about it differently. We have to think about it within the context of one's existence, because having bills to pay is just one expense in the cost of existence. And here are some questions to think about if you find yourself in defense or reasoning as to why you cannot pursue a fulfilling career path and your vocation. How much should one be compensated to repress one's soul? What's it worth to pretend you're doing okay for the next 40 years of your life? Is the financial compensation worth the emotional and psychological pain of being spiritually unhealthy? What happens is that whenever someone brings money up as the defense as to why they can't pursue something, why they can't pursue their calling, what's really going on is that money is being held over them as a primary form of control and as the main value that they should aspire towards. It means that we're ascribing an ultimate value to it. And if we think about our values as gods, we believe in what we obey. And earning money can very easily become this way in which we don't nurture the spiritual plane of existence because we're obeying a material existence that only brings in this idea of making sure that we can self-preserve, keep ourselves alive, keep the lights on, keep the bills paid, keep us going on holidays, keep us going out to fancy restaurants, keep the car's payments made. And we start to neglect and negate the spiritual plane of existence, which causes us to be spiritually ill. Meaning that even if we don't believe, like consciously, and we say like money isn't the most important thing, money isn't the most important value, if we cannot leave a job or a career that we know is making us spiritually sick because we perceive money as connected to safety and therefore we can't leave it, otherwise we will, and we have this fear psychologically and we think literally that things might not work out and therefore I'm going to lose everything that I've built, I'm going to get ruined and I'm going to go into this place of turmoil, inner turmoil, and this sort of existential threat of existence. It means that money holds a power over us. It's not as clean as saying that money is the root of all evil. But instead what it says is that if money is controlling you and causing you to not be able to nurture the spiritual plane of your own existence, allowing you to be spiritually healthy, then a revolt against money as an ultimate value, the main thing to pursue, needs to happen. It becomes a spiritual necessity. You have to change money's place on the hierarchy of what you are pursuing in your existence. And to begin thinking about money's place in your own life, you can think about some of the saints. You can think about Francis of Assisi and how he took the vow of poverty. Now, the vow of poverty is very interesting because in the modern world, we think of poverty as bad. We think of being homeless as the opposite to an ideal life, the opposite to living well. And yet here was someone that said, hey, I'm going to bring money and take it down to a very low value in my existence. And by doing that, it allows other values to take its place. Transvaluation, right? These other values start to come up and be known. And they get to take their place. And so, for example, pursuing the divine, pursuing a spiritual life becomes a higher value. It's given the room to be pursued. And so whilst I'm not saying that money is bad and that you shouldn't pursue money and that you should really push it away, what I am saying is that if it is structured in your life in such a way whereby you cannot pursue your calling, you cannot pursue what you're born to pursue, it needs to change on the ladder of what is important. It needs to go down a peg. And by doing that, other values can rise up and support you and sustain you in this life. Remember that when you leave this earth, you can take with you nothing that you have received, only what you have given. Saint Francis of Assisi. Symptom 3, becoming your worst self. If you find yourself in common arguments with your partner, fights and tussles with friends and family members, if you find yourself just being irritated by things that didn't really used to irritate you in the past, this can often be a sign that you're becoming spiritually ill at work. And this idea of transformation is a really big topic within the spiritual space. But what isn't talked about is that there is this reverse transformation, this anti-becoming, becoming someone that you're not meant to become. And when this occurs, it occurs because when you're not connected to that spiritual plane of existence, you move backwards. You move towards something that you're not. And there's a part of you that will fight for it and will get angry and will get mad and will say like, hey, you need to be pursuing something more. And they'll do it as just like outbursts and you're trying to destroy current environments that you're in. But everything is going backwards. And the analogy that I like to use is that you can imagine that you are a gardener that has to take care of the Garden of Versailles. And in doing that, you are someone that has to make sure that everything is pruned, everything is watered, everything is well kept. And if you suddenly stopped caring for it, you suddenly just said, no, I'm not going to take care of this garden, I'm just going to go and do something else, then slowly weeds start to creep in. Nature starts to take over. Everything that was magical and beautiful and wonderful about it starts to decay, disintegrate. It starts to get lost. And all you'll end up getting is this overgrown area that no longer shows the beauty of the place that it once was. And it becomes uninhabitable and really just causes devastation on the entire space. And because modern work disconnects us from the spiritual plane of existence, the longer we stay there, the longer we're in those environments, the more likely it is that we are going to become the worst self, the person we don't want to be, purely because we're not nurturing that part of ourselves that needs us so much. So the question becomes, if we stay in the modern workplace in the way that it is, under the conditions that it's being governed by, are we able to nurture the garden? Are we able to nurture the spiritual plane of existence? Or will we lose ourselves to these overgrown weeds? Now, to start becoming aware of the person that you're becoming at work, one thing that you can do, and this exercise is not for the faint of heart, but one thing that you can do is before you go to work, right? So let's say that you're in a job that you don't like, you're in a career that you don't like, you created and started a business that you don't like, and it's just not feeding you in the way that maybe it did at one point in your life. One thing that you can do is before you go to work, you're in your work gear and your outfit, and you're just about to leave the house or log onto the computer, go into the mirror. And I want you to just stare at yourself in the eyes, right? In the eyes. Stare at yourself in the mirror, look yourself in the eyes, and just observe. Observe your mood, observe your clothes, observe your identity, observe your facial expressions. How does it look like you're feeling? Observe how much you want to go to this place and how much you don't. Really connect into your current situation at this point in time. And after about 1 to 2 minutes of just observing yourself, I want you to ask this question. Does this work bring out the best version of myself? And if you're brave in that moment and you're receptive to the truth, you're going to receive an answer. And that answer is going to tell you if this is taking you the right direction or the wrong direction. The greatest hazard of all, losing oneself, can occur very quietly in the world, as if it were nothing at all. No other loss can occur so quietly. Any other loss, an arm, a leg, $5, a wife, etc., is sure to be noticed. Soren Kierkegaard, The Sickness Unto Death. Symptom 4, low energy and burnout. Waking up day after day after day for something that you're not passionate about, something that you're not connected to, something that is not the thing that you're born to do, that's going to wear on you over time. There's no amount of, hey, this is a new job, this is a new promotion, this is a fun team, here's some perks, here's some extra flexibility, you can work at home now. None of this is going to give you the deeper connection to source energy that you need in order to pursue your path long-term in a way that is correct. One of the interesting things that I found in studying the chakra system, this philosophy system that comes out of the sort of Indian tantric spiritual traditions and speaks about having these energy centers. Essentially, these energy centers are archetypal and experiential in nature, and they hold information within these different energy centers, is that when you look at the solar plexus chakra, Manipura, this area that speaks to willpower, self-assertion, drive, right? It really speaks to action in the world. When it's blocked, someone is very lax, they don't have drive for anything, they don't have an energy for life. They are having to pull themselves into the world constantly and it's drag. They're not just there with vitality, eyes open, ready to go. Right? They're a bit glazed over. And this really speaks to how we approach trying to heal burnout and low energy. Oftentimes people will say that they need to go on a really long break, and they often do. But it doesn't solve the root problem. It doesn't solve what's going on at the core. Because you can go out and have a break and you can rejuvenate, but if you come back to the same environment, or if you come back to the same way of pursuing your work in the world, it's only a matter of time before it starts to drain out again. Right? The root wasn't sorted. And so when the spirit is left out of the work, then there's a lack of the work being able to symbiotically feed the individual. Because when you're doing the work that you are actually meant to be doing, it feeds you too. It gives you something back. And it's this really cool back and forward building momentum towards a calling that takes you higher. But when you're doing something that is not the thing that you're meant to be doing, you have to constantly pull yourself into it. And the momentum goes downwards because you're having to use excess energy just to get yourself to the place. And so the solar plexus really does teach us from a vocational perspective that we need to have spirit in the work. We need to have our identity in the work connected to it so that we ourselves can be fed by the work. And so work fundamentally needs to provide us energy on the spiritual plane of existence. And the only way it does that is if we nurture that area, that unseen area where we find soul, where we find spirit, where we find deep connection. And we're like, oh, this is the thing where we lose ourselves to work and then we shake ourselves like, whoa, where did all the time go? These moments are great insights into feeding the correct places in our lives. And so the work is either going to give us energy, fuel us over time, make us more into it, more engaged with it, more connected to it, or it's going to deplete us, pull energy away from us, defuel us. And we have to be really attentive and aware. Is this work giving me energy towards my calling? Or is it pulling me away from it? And to begin understanding how work can give you fuel and can help nurture the spiritual plane of existence, think about an activity, something that you're passionate about, interested in, something that you do even though you're not paid to do it, but you do it because you enjoy it. So this could be something like creating lo-fi beats, taking care of your vegetable garden, looking over celebrity natal charts, discussing video essays on pop culture with a friend, doing research for your dystopian sci-fi novel, flipping tarot cards, and you do that every morning, doing the breath of fire every night, whatever it is, and reflect how that gives you something in return. By doing this activity, right, active involvement, active engagement with it, it gives you something back. And then simply ask yourself, what is missing in my work that this activity has? The essential thing is to work in a state of mind that approaches prayer. Henry Matisse. Now, a spiritually healthy version of you at work is not someone that just meditates before work. It's not someone that goes to therapy that sorts out their problems. It's not someone that goes and does a bunch of spiritual online courses. It's someone that properly arranges and organizes their life so that they are spiritually nurtured in the work itself, meaning that a spiritually healthy person is in a proper relationship with their own life. And so they are very much aware of the spiritual plane of existence. They might not call it that, but they're aware of these unseen components that need to be fed. And they ensure that their work feeds them. And if the work that they're doing, if the career, the job, the place that they find employment in is not allowing them to nurture that part of themselves, they prepare themselves to leave. They prepare themselves to move to somewhere that will allow them to do it, or will allow them to do it eventually. And so they don't submit to what other people tell them to do. Instead, they ask the question, does this place allow me to really feed my soul? Because they know that by pursuing their calling in this lifetime, it's going to give them more energy, they're going to be more engaged with life, they're going to enjoy life more, they're going to be more creative, they're going to be deeply devoted to their craft, they're going to be in conversation with their own nature and the development of their own nature, and they're going to give themselves the room to be able to spiritually grow. A spiritually healthy society. A spiritually healthy society is one that puts the individual spiritual health as an ultimate value. And that means not just on the weekends, but also in the very work that we do during our everyday life. And so whilst the Great Resignation that caused so many millions of people to leave their jobs, whilst that was addressing these symptoms, we need to start addressing spiritual health itself. And so this doesn't mean reorganizing people within the current structures that we have out there. It means that we have to question and reorganize the very structures themselves, the values that they promote, and the values that they ask us to pursue. Because the current values are making us spiritually ill. And we know that on an individual level, that when we are fulfilled, we are better people, we are more connected to other humans, we take pride in what we do. We also do better work. We're also fed by that work, and we want to keep doing it. And so doing this on an individual level ends up creating this ripple effect that impacts people at the societal level. And the world becomes a fundamentally better place when we pursue our spiritual health collectively, because our divine nature is respected and the spirit is allowed to exist in our work, healing us in the process. Now, if you yourself do find that you are spiritually ill in the current workplace, but you don't know which career path to choose, how to go about pursuing your vocation in this world, then you'll want to go ahead and check out our online community. And so in our online community, there is an 8-week course where I guide students and members through this process of choosing their own career archetype. And we do this by looking at you as an individual through multiple different perspectives. And we use certain modalities and subjects and viewpoints to get access to that. Some of this includes Jungian psychology, astrology, feedback loops. We look at psychological barriers and hindrances. We also look at your many different interests, and we distill it down and find what is really running the show, what is core to your vocation and your calling. And we also map out your life mythology. Where have you been? Where are you now? Where are you going? And do you even know you're going in that direction? And by doing this, we gather all this material up, and I show you exactly how to choose your career archetype. Now, there are hundreds of career archetypes. These are personalized and they're individualized to you and your specific path. And by going through this process, you'll come to know what your exact career archetype is. And also, we start to map out exactly what the steps are, what the very first steps you need to take look like, what the structure looks like. We look at how to earn money in the modern world. And so if you are that person and you want to be in a community of other people that are unearthing their career archetypes every single day and walking their paths in the world, then I would encourage you to check out our online community. I'll leave a link below.